Hello, class.
Welcome to Art of the Middle Ages with your usual hosts, Mr. Walter and Mr. Barterone.
Alrighty, it's time, ladies and gentlemen, to say goodbye to the ways of the Greeks and make way for that fabulous AP Art history teacher, Mr. Kevin Hackney.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to be making a guest appearance here with Mr. Walter and Mr. Martin about the art.
Alrighty, we're going to take a look, guys, a real quick recap back to the days of classical Rome. Now, you remember the Roman Empire stretched all the way around the Mediterranean Sea. It spread all the way from what's now Spain through France, through Italy. At the center point was Rome, through the Balkan Peninsula, all the way down through the Middle East and up through Northern Africa.
Yeah, Rome was a real big empire, and if you remember, it eventually split into two different sections. One was had the capital as Constantinople and became later the Byzantine Empire, and then we can go back to the western side, which was originally Rome. And if you remember, Rome had a lot of problems towards the end, and there were a lot of different groups that were trying to invade and conquer Rome.
Some of those groups include the Franks, the Turks, the Visigoths, and the Vandals.
Again, just as a quick recap of what happened, constant attack from the north led to the fall of the Western Roman Empire. It's expensive running an empire this big.
Alrighty. Western Europe is left without a unified government for the first time in over 500 years, so it's in shambles. This period is known as the Middle or Dark Ages.
The only unifying factor was that the Catholic Church was still centered in Rome. And lastly, the Romans had spread Christianity as far north as England.
Alrighty, so when Mr. Hackney starts talking about that art, Christianity is going to be a huge component of that.
All right, guys, this is Mr. Hackney taking over. So let's go first over some of the characteristics of the Middle Ages. Now, everybody had just studied and got done looking at ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Ancient Greece, ancient Rome focused on the human form, humanism, the ideal man as a depiction of what art should be. Now, we're going to go through some of the characteristics. So we have over here Doryphoros, the spear bearer, and he is no longer going to be the standard for which art is measured. Now, humans look rigid, though, during the Middle Ages and unrealistic. Okay? Subjects focus on religion. The church was wealthy, so they could actually afford art. Okay? We don't have average everyday people paying for art to be created, mostly coming from the church. Now, a lot of the pieces, especially if you look here to the left, are used gold. The use of gold is very prevalent, especially in some of the carpet pages and the illuminated manuscripts that we're going to look at. And gold symbolizes heaven and spirituality. If you look at the four corners over here, they are the four evangelists, all kind of copied in gold. They have different animals that represent them. Now, objects also appear flat. The artists are not concerned with depth really at all because they're all focused on the spirituality and the religion of the piece that they're depicting. Okay? And again, the focus was not on realism like we saw in ancient Greece and in ancient Rome. It was all about humanism, or it was not about humanism, and it was on spirituality. So you see Jesus right there in the center, looks flat. He does not necessarily have depth to him. We don't really see a background. It's kind of very flat colors, and that's going to start us off with looking at some of the art here from the Middle Ages. Now, our first piece that we're going to look at is a carpet page or an illuminated manuscript page. It was done on sheepskin or vellum. This one is called the Cross and Carpet Page from the Lindisfarne Gospels. It is from England, and it was drawn by monks. Most of the art that we're going to look at, ladies and gentlemen, is all hand done by monks, all right, that were living in monasteries. They were kind of by themselves, very hidden, all right, from the rest of the world. They worked on these Bibles for hours upon hours upon hours every single day. Now, they were often the only citizens in the Middle Ages that actually knew how to read and write. So the language and art kind of kept going with the Catholic monks as time goes on. Now, with that though, you see in here a lot of interwoven designs. These designs, and this weaving design that you see here on these pages is called cloisonné, all right, cloisonné. It's also used, you see, in some metal work that we'll see later on as well. But all these little designs, all these interweaving patterns, a very typical depiction of something that would come from the Middle Ages. Now, next up, we have something called the St. Matthew page, also from the same book. This would have been seen in the Bible. And as we can see right here, St. Matthew is writing down, all right, his gospel for St. Matthew. It's very, very flat looking, almost looks as if it is, you have rigid form, no depth. You kind of see a person over, you see an angel above trumpeting, all right?
Mr. Hackney, what's that plate behind that guy's head?
Well, that plate is not something they're going to have dinner off of, but what it does, it represents, ladies and gentlemen, that the fact anytime you see that little gold disc around an angel, around somebody that's writing, that means that they are divine. Okay, they are somehow intermixed with the religion that they are writing about or talking about. So let's go over to the left-hand side here and talk about what this is all about. Now, the majority of art from the Middle Ages is found in Bibles, which we talked about already. The humans look rigid and unrealistic. If you look at Matthew right here, he's very flat. All of his clothes have kind of this same rigid appearance. They don't look like they're free-flowing like we saw in the wet cloth drapery from ancient Greece. Now, the use of gold is prevalent. Again, we talked about it on the last slide, only to show spirituality. So we see the gold around the disc around their heads all represents spirituality or heaven. Okay. Now, again, the gold disc we'll see in every piece that we're going to look at here. All right. Now, we're going to move on to our next piece. So you're going to see some common themes: the gold discs, the interweaving patterns, and you see the interweaving patterns even here. All right, around the corners of the page. And do you see any landscapes or depth? Not happening.
No, I don't.
Now, second to last piece we're looking at is called God as the Architect of the World. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that may look like Jesus. It is not. It's supposed to look like Jesus. Or it's supposed to look like God. But he almost looks like Jesus a little bit. Now, what's he doing? What are some characteristics that we see here that we talked about? You got that gold plate on the back of the head. Shows that he is God. And what's God doing? He is using geometry passed down from the ancient Greeks to create the world. Okay, he is creating literally the universe. Right? And you see the gold background, all kind of depicts that this person is, and this event is taking place in heaven. Now, if we go to the left, we'll look at what the techniques that we see being used here. You see God using tools, all right, of an architect. There's no sense of depth or perspective that we saw in ancient Greece. God is depicted to look a lot like Jesus, and again, we see the use of gold to show that this even is taking place outside of our world and in the spiritual world. Again, all that gold back there. Lot of gold. Now, our last piece that we're going to look at today. Very sad, very solemn, all right? You see, it doesn't really look realistic. This doesn't look like a Greek statue.
I was going to say, it doesn't look like it's in proportion at all, Mr. Hackney.
I was going to say, it looked like you didn't stretch the picture out enough.
It may look like that, but it is meant to look like that, all right? The accentuated head, all right? The accentuated bodies. If you look really closely, you even see, all right, the blood spurting out of the hands of Christ, and also he was jabbed in his chest by a spear, and you also see blood running out, all right? They are over-accentuating this. They really want you to feel the emotion here. So this piece was created just around the time period that I know you guys were talking about with the Middle Ages, the Black Death, all right? So this piece is called Virgin, all right, with the dead Christ, and the body is out of proportion to emphasize the emotion of Christ and as well as Mary. Now, since this piece was created during the Black Plague, the church wanted statues created that showed that Mary and Jesus understood the sorrow that the average everyday citizen was going through with the loss of life during the Black Death.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hackney, for being able to help us out with our flipped art lesson today.
Now, at any point, if you felt that we went a little bit too fast through this artwork, or you need to reevaluate all the artwork, you can go back, you can play this video again, pause on any of the points that you have, and be prepared for art creation in your next class. That's all. Have a great night. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Mr. Hackney.
No problem. Glad to be here.
And thank you very much, Mr. Walter.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Alrighty, guys, have a great day.